What's your name?
I want to silence fascists and bigots.
Yes. So you want to silence women?
Well, if they're also, so like women can choose not to be, and also you're not a woman, you know. So,
How do you know? You just misgendered me.
Are you a woman then?
Oh, how do you know? How do you know I'm not a woman?
My name is Ann McElhinney.
And I'm Phelim Scoop.
Welcome to the Ann and Phelim Scoop.
Yes. So, we are still in Ireland. We will be heading back to the States shortly. But it's, we're in progressive Ireland. So if you live in not so progressive America, this is coming to a city and a state near you. So Ireland is trying to out California, I think.
Yep, exactly.
And so at the weekend, where were we at? We were from TERF to TERF.
Oh, boom, boom.
We were at an Irish women's rights rally in Dublin where
Yes.
they were protesting about the trans madness.
To talk about women's rights.
Journalists asking questions is now possibly against the law. It's very interesting. And by the way, we'll talk some later on about the hate crime legislation that was postponed. We're already on dicey ground asking difficult questions here.
And look at who supports trans rights. With friends like these, who needs enemies?
Yes.
We're going to bring you who exactly is in the ranks of these trans rights people.
Yes.
And kind of extraordinary. We'll show you some of the pictures we took there. And we talked to a journalist
on being a TERF and how this, we talked to a journalist about being a TERF and what she's seeing. She's based in Europe, so Europe it's interesting differences between Europe and Ireland and America and the UK and
we should stop, Phelim, and just say, for those of you who don't know, what a TERF is. TERF, not spelled TURF, which of course is a fuel source, a fossil fuel source in Ireland, but actually TERF, TERF, which is trans-exclusionary
radical
feminist, which is basically another phrase for, and by the way, that's meant to be insulting, that's meant to be an insult to people who are basically anti-grooming of children, anti-trans madness, who are just basically completely
anti-puberty blockers for children, I'm actually anti-puberty blockers for any age. I'm also anti-trans surgery at any age. Adults can have anorexia. Adults can be mentally ill. That doesn't mean that we should affirm the mental illness, affirm the anorexia,
Correct.
affirm the bulimia, affirm the addiction. The adults can be addicted to heroin. They can be addicted to all sorts of things. We shouldn't affirm it.
No.
We should try and help them through it.
And the last item we have today is: did Trump really condemn Ron DeSantis for signing a heartbeat bill? We investigate what he said and what it means for the election.
And when we say heartbeat bill, we mean an abortion heartbeat bill.
Yes.
Yeah. So
let's start.
We went to this rally on Saturday in Dublin. First thing that struck me, I went over, because this is what I do. I went over to the Antifa-led opposition. There's also a party called People Before Profit, PBB. As the journalist says later, she calls them People Banning Puberty Party. So they were leading it. But also look at who the friends are. And this is the footage I took. So there, look at that. The picture of Lenin, the picture of the hammer and sickle, the socialist banners.
But I mean, just to stop on the Lenin thing for a moment, do you think, Phelim, Lenin would have been very sympathetic to people who are men who dress up as women? Do you think Lenin would have been a great supporter and protector of children who are confused? Would that be a thing now that you would have thought Lenin would have been associated with?
I think
Phelim?
there would be a gulag especially for them.
Yeah.
I mean, Che Guevara wrote in his diaries how much he enjoyed shooting homosexuals.
Oh my God! Right, and this is who these people.
And that
are.
was in the 60s. That was like in the 60s. So I don't think Lenin and Stalin. He had a great time killing homosexuals. I don't even think there was such a thing as transsexuals then.
But what was interesting about the rally, I mean, my kind of impression, and I know Phelim's going to tell a story in a moment about what happened to him, but what was my big take out of this thing was the rally that was organised that was called Let Women Speak, right? So it was this Let Women Speak, and it's obviously a lot of them have a lot to say particularly about this trans madness. And then this opposition shows up. This very, very organised opposition shows up to drown out the women's voices. And it's like, have you heard about the suffragettes? Did you hear about women's rights?
Yes.
Whatever happened to that? So you have these men, mostly men, making huge amounts of noise. And you'll hear some of that when you hear some of that footage. But they were making like really blaring, having this kind of, but also having that noise like a siren, like a police siren.
They were literally trying to drown. I mean, you can metaphorically try and silence someone. They were literally trying to silence someone so that they couldn't be heard by playing loud music on an amplifier, sirens.
So apparently, you're not allowed to have certain opinions, and if you have those opinions, you will not be allowed. You'll be silenced by this mob.
Yeah. So I was standing there. I was filming it as a journalist and looking around. And next thing, coming into the TERF side was someone who quite obviously was not a TERF, was pro trans madness, pro double mastectomies, pro all of that, pro puberty blockers, pro a man can be a woman just by saying he's a woman, all that. And she came with this sign, we'll put it up there, this thing on a stick, and it's try a new hobby. You've fallen down a scaremongering rabbit hole. Your fears are invented by others to make you angry and spread them further. Talk to your friends and family. Many of them know actual trans people. And then on the other side was other anti TERF, and pro-trans stuff. So I went over to the lady, and as you can see, I went over and I asked her, and she said to me before I started filming, she said, "Well, it's a free speech issue." And of course, I said to her, and you can hear me say it now, what do you think would happen if somebody went over there with a poster, a anti-trans poster, over to the other side? Oh, I think they'd be treated very well. I mean, we all know that you'd get your head cleaved off.
It was very, very aggressive.
Very angry. Very angry. But interestingly, funny enough, a lot of the English people, I met a few English people who came over to support the TERFs, and they were saying that they felt that the Dublin people on their side were more angry than the people in England. And I think that's because there's a real debate in England.
Yes.
In most of Europe, and she'll hear Roisin, the person we interview later, she's saying there's more anger in Europe and there's more anger in Ireland than there is in the UK. But there's a massive ongoing debate in the UK. So I said to this woman, I said that, and she says, no, it'll be treated fine. And she says it's a free speech issue. And I says, okay, it's a free speech issue, but you think these women here, you think people shouldn't be allowed to say what they say? And she kind of looks at me, and let's hear it, right?
Let's listen to this.
What would happen, do you think, if someone with one of these signs went over to that stage?
So you were asking me a second ago. I think it'd be grand. You can try it.
Yeah. And you thought it was a free speech issue?
Yeah.
So why do they want to stop people like Posey Parker speaking? Why do they want to they're actually saying no Nazis, no Posey Parker.
Well,
so
I guess they're
it's free
pointing
speech.
out that a lot of the people here are like fascists that also hate immigrants and also hate women in general.
Yes,
and
yes.
want to roll back abortion rights and everything.
But do you think they should have a right to speak?
I don't think they should have Sorry?
No, let her speak.
I'm not silencing women. I want you to listen to me as well.
Yeah, no, but do you think these people here have a right to speak?
I don't think hate has a right to speak.
So you want to silence women then?
Look, I got places to be, so.
No, you're here.
It's nice to meet
Do you want to silence women then? Is that... What's your name?
I want to silence fascists and bigots.
Yes. So you want to silence women?
Well, if they're also women can choose not to be, and also you're not a woman, So,
How do you know? You just misgendered me.
Are you a woman?
Oh, how do you know? How do you know I'm not a woman?
Basically, yes, she agrees that women who disagree with her should be silenced. Right? So that is what she's saying. So this is where it got very, very interesting. Right? So I went over and I continued to question her. Now, I was continuing to question her and trying to really tease her out, but also trying to see what was going to emerge. Next thing, and you'll see it here, a thug jumps in front of me, grabs me by the shoulder and pulls me back and jumps in front of me. One of her thug friends.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Watch that video.
Right.
Excuse me.
What? No, there's nothing wrong. Let her stay.
And next thing, two uniformed members, the Gardaí, which is the Irish police, come and remove this woman under something called Section 21 of the Public Order Act. And if you hear me and other people saying, don't remove her, we don't mind her being here, please do not remove her. And they were, no. So in Ireland, you can be removed from the street during a protest for having the wrong sign.
Let her stay.
Any side, okay?
Sorry?
You make sure everyone gets in and gets safe, okay? That's all we're doing, okay?
I actually think, if you look at what I was asking her, I was making her think and making her for the first time have to really examine what she believed and the consequences of it. I felt I was actually getting somewhere. And in fact, I think she was kind of relieved that they were forcing her out. There was no objection. But you see me there, I'm going, no, let her stay. So anyway, she was thrown out under Section 21 of the Public Order Act. If any Irish people out there know more about this, tell me what that Section 21 is.
Yes.
Do you think the guards were correct in doing that? The police, Irish police? I don't know. So then I was standing there, I was thinking, how else can I do my journalism? How else can I cause trouble? Basically the same thing. That's what journalism should do. So I thought, well, that thug who stood in front of me to protect this, to stop me, because I was asking her questions, and you could see sometimes she was unable to answer. She couldn't come up with an answer.
Yeah.
So I went back and I started asking the thug, and here's me asking the thug difficult questions about, does he believe in freedom of speech? Does he believe, why did you stand in front of me? Why did you grab me?
Let's watch that.
Yeah.
Hey there, why did you do that? Yeah, you did. Why did you push me out of the way?
Okay, so, and again, you've noticed I blanked out his face. I would blurred his face. So then this happened.
Yeah, you're not allowed inside in this area, okay? Okay, step out of here.
So you jumped in front of me?
No, yeah, I did, and I'm now directing you to leave this area, okay?
Yes, turns out Mr. Thug is an undercover cop, right? By the way, good disguise.
Yep.
I mean, genuine. And then his friend emerged, who's also an undercover cop, and then they want to throw me out. The only time he wanted to throw me out was when I was putting the camera not in his face, but was asking him difficult questions.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Now, I'm blanking out his face here, right? Because I think he acted outside the law. I think he was wrong. Maybe he didn't. Maybe that's the law. Maybe he's allowed to do that.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Wouldn't surprise me. But at the end,
but it's funny. Once Phelim kind of pointed out that this guy was an undercover cop, it was really interesting because we looked around. I was looking around. At one stage, they had asked people.
Let me finish the story. So I'm being thrown out, and I'm going, like, I'm a journalist, and at one stage he says, where's your credentials? And by the way, journalists don't have to show their credentials. It's not a police state.
Cops.
To anyone, it's not a police state, right? But luckily one of the stewards came along and said, no, he films at a lot of our events and that. He's a journalist. And then I was allowed to stay.
He comes to our events. So
I'm with them.
Capture cameras in people's faces.
No, but it's a public space.
So we blurred out his face because I think I'm not there to give cops a hard time. I think he acted outside
appropriately.
No, I think he opted slightly outside his powers, right? Basically, he lost his temper, I think, and went to throw me out because I was giving him a hard time. And I'm not, look, I was, let's just say I was firm in my questioning and was looking for answers and got them. But so that was resolved. But listen, there's a hate crime legislation coming to Ireland. Even Elon Musk, let's put up that tweet, even Elon Musk has condemned it. They postponed it because it's a hot potato. But if the cops can throw a woman out of a woman's march for having the wrong placard, if they can throw a journalist out for asking a cop
hard
questions, then this hate crime legislation,
not going to be good.
It's going to be, there'll be no freedom of speech.
But I have to say that I was going to say there earlier that, we realised then, I sort of started looking, and of course I could then, it's kind of funny, we could really easily spot all these undercover cops. They were just all over the place, because at certain times they were asking people to cheer because, to cheer the speakers, and they were saying, give them a big cheer, because all of course the anti-free speech, the anti-women, let women speak people who were the other side of the barricades were making all this noise. So every now and again they'd say, make lots of noise, so people would try and make lots of noise, and I would look behind me and there were these young men dressed far too neatly, wearing a lot of navy, let's just say, and wearing shiny shoes, and kind of looking
And the hair.
decent and kind of nicely shaved. And
They looked like they'd just come from their first communion.
they looked very nice and very well behaved, but they were going and they were just sort of smirking, and I was thinking, yeah, they're not cheering because they're actually undercover cops. So, but I have to say one thing, and I think a lot of people who were part of the organisers of the event were very happy that the Gardaí, that the Irish police force were, took it seriously and had done this thing where they had separated the crowds. But it was actually kind of extraordinary. I mean, it's very amazing to see women, having an event called Let Women Speak,
Yes.
where there is a concerted effort and an organised effort to not let them speak. And one thing, I'm not sure if we're going to go straight to the interview now, Phelim.
I was a couple of things I want to say. First of all, I think my cop wins best undercover cop off the rally. I mean, it was a complete shock to me. I don't want to show his face, but believe me, he looks like a thug, which is pretty good. The rest of them were pretty. You're going, that's an undercover cop, that's an undercover cop. Maybe they weren't undercover as such, but this, you could see this guy doing a drug deal on a corner. So 10 out of 10, Mr. Undercover Cop.
Yes.
I got his name, which I'm not going to give out here on air. 10 out of 10, Mr. Undercover Cop. Perhaps 6 out of 10, 10 out of 10 for looks and demeanour and dress, by the way. 6 out of 10 perhaps for interpretation of public order legislation. Maybe not. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd love people to tell me in the notes, in the comment section, did he do the right thing or am I right? Rest of the cops, listen, they were there to protect us, to be fair, and things went well apart from that little hiccup, and that's why I'm not going to make a bigger thing out of this, and I don't want to get anyone into any trouble. I just wish cops would study the legislation better and allow journalists to do their job and allow people to come in and peacefully oppose other people. Anyway, that's here endeth my little comment.
So one of the things that happened actually at the rally that was kind of interesting was we walked in and almost immediately met some of the women who had been at the play in London, Mermaids versus the Alliance play that Phelim had written, and they were all delighted to see us, so very, very nice. But also we met Bran Dove, who some of you will remember was the young girl, 14 years old, high school student in Ireland, who has written this amazing poem, I Am Not a Dress. And she addressed the crowd. Some of you will remember her. We interviewed her on the show about what had happened to her in school. But let's listen now to some of the speech she made at the event, Let Women Speak. Let's listen to that now.
As a secondary school student here in Ireland, it absolutely sickens me to tell you that there are teachers over there in that crowd. This temper tantrum is their reaction to some people voicing a different opinion. And with some of them being teachers, can you imagine how they would react should a student disagree with their outlandish views? Because I don't have to imagine, I know all too well what can happen. The reason I'm standing here now is because 2 years ago I asked some questions in class. I was 12 years old. My school was partaking in Stand-Up Week, which is all about pushing trans insanity, which is also organised by Belong To. Exactly. It's organised by Belong To, and by the way, schools across Ireland will be partaking in this week again from the 6th of November this year, so parents, please look after your kids. When my school partook in Stand-Up Week in 2021, the most outrageous lies were taught as fact. We were told trans women are women, sexing assigned at birth. The use of preferred pronouns is essential. I wasn't swallowing any of it. surprise, surprise, my teachers weren't able to answer any of them. After that, all hell broke loose. Teachers started making desperate attempts to re-educate me. There was one instance when my science teacher spent half an hour trying to convince me that being a man or a woman has nothing to do with your reproductive system. I mean, come on, my science teacher! Another instance where a teacher told me that I shouldn't voice my beliefs in my school because it's very inclusive. I mean, inclusive. Like, they're excluding me because I understand reality. How is that in any way inclusive? Inclusive, my arse.
So, quite extraordinary. This is what is happening in high schools in Ireland, by the way.
Yes.
In Ireland.
Yep.
So don't bother with even thinking about California. Extraordinary. And another thing that struck me, and it'll come up a little bit in this next interview that we're going to put on just now with this journalist that we spoke to earlier, who was also a member, was also at the event and spoke at the event, is she talked about the fact that the organised opposition is very much made up of NGOs, these non-governmental organisations, charities that are paid for mostly in Ireland by taxpayers, including TENI, which is, I'm just going to get you the complete name of that. So they're called Transgender Equality Network Ireland. Huge money from the government. And just to give you an idea how completely, again, do you remember last week I sort of said, sometimes you might say to yourself, am I going completely mad? No, you're not going mad. The world's gone mad and you're totally sane, and more people need to stand up and say, this is madness. And here's just amazing from this network, Trans Equality Network Ireland. As I said, Irish taxpayers are paying to make this NGO happen. And they've got these life hacks, including how to do binding. Binding refers to the act of flattening breast tissue with constrictive materials. This should be done with a chest binder. Research where you can buy a binder. Underworks, approximately €28. And they give you the names of where to do it. Regularly wash your binder and air dry it. Measure your chest size up, get help, whatever. So this is transgender. Well, and I just said to Phelim today, why don't we have, maybe they should give us information about foot binding, because foot binding was a bit of a thing, right, that was done in certain Asian countries with women. This was the idea that men found it really attractive if women had really, really small feet. And so what you do is you go ahead and
women wanted small feet.
And women wanted the small feet then because it was attractive. And so what you do is you just break all their toes and you keep binding them, and you eventually get over all the smell of the rotten flesh and all that kind of good stuff. So it's a version of that, this binding.
They should have a leaflet about how to be, what's best for anorexia.
Yeah.
Or bulimia.
Yeah, because if this is acceptable.
Because anorexia is about changing your body and stopping it growing, and this is chest binding, which is the same thing.
It's unbelievable. I mean, this is so, you are not going mad. The world has gone mad.
Yes.
But let's go to this interview that we did earlier. Let's go over to that interview right now, and this is with the journalist and writer and trans. A very critical Roisin
Michaux.
Michaux.
Yes, based in Brussels. We met her at the...
Roisin, yes.
Roisin.
Roisin Michaux.
Can I just say something? Our American producer sent us...
The correct pronunciation of Roisin.
How to correct pronunciation.
And of course, we have Roisins in our own family.
Yes.
So we don't need anyone helping us with the pronunciation, but thank you very much, producer. But yes, Roisin Michaux, and we spoke to her earlier. She lives in Brussels. Of course, she was here at the weekend, but let's go over to that right now.
Okay, so we're joined now by Roisin Michaux. She's a writer and advocate for sex-based rights, and we indeed, in fact, met her at the rally on Saturday. She's based in Brussels, and she has, a very interesting take on the transgender movement. She writes for Unheard and numerous other publications, and is very powerful and pulls no punches when writing about the trans madness. So welcome to the show, Roisin.
Thank you very much for having me. Delighted to chat to you today.
So what did you think about the rally on Saturday? What were your thoughts? Were you surprised by it, or was it different from other rallies you might have been at?
I think in terms of overall, it was just a huge success. I was when I got there, I saw that there were only about 25 women gathered at like 11:15, and I flipped out a bit and I said, oh my God, what if only like 20 of us show up? And then people just started streaming in and streaming and streaming. It did not stop streaming. So I was really happy with the numbers, first of all. I was really happy with the Garda setup. I feel like the format has been done enough now, and there are enough videos out there and examples and articles that I think any police force worth their salt is able to see exactly what's the ideal setup. So it's sort of like put enough space between us that you're giving them the chance to feel like they're protesting us, and then enough distance for us to be able to hear each other speak. So I sort of feel like it's probably the Dublin setup is very similar to the Utrecht setup that I was at last week. So only last weekend I went to the Netherlands, to the city of Utrecht, which is in the north, and they had the exact same sort of distance and the exact same setup, but the police there tried their best, but I don't think they've really... I think there's a stronger Antifa presence in the Netherlands, and they started throwing the fences. They started dismantling the metal barriers and started throwing them, and the horses got spooked. So the police removed their barriers. So I think the guards might be probably, like, I understand that there was a lot of work behind the scenes. The guards probably did a lot of research and were shared a lot of articles and stuff, and could see that, I think people are learning now. I think the event itself is getting known. So...
I mean, it's the first time I've been to one of these events, by the way, and I have loads of thoughts, but I'd love you to talk about who these protesters were, who were extreme. To me, my view of it, like, they seemed very, very organized, very well financed.
You mean
the event we went to was called Let Women Speak. That event was announced, and then after that announcement comes this counter protest by these people who wanted to not let women speak, I suppose, must be what they were up to, because their big thing was making lots and lots of noise. Who are these people? Who are they?
So in every country, it's kind of the same. You've got these charities, they're usually charities in the UK, they're NGOs, they're non-profits. And it's the same everywhere. They get grants from international funders, but they also get grants from national funders. They get lots of money from, in Ireland, they get a lot of money, particularly in Ireland, they get a lot of money from the state. So the Department of Children, Youth Integration, I can't remember what it is, and the Health Service Executive and the Suicide Prevention Agency. So basically you've got these NGOs that have been around for quite a long time, relatively speaking, because a lot of this is quite new. But for example, the biggest trans rights organisation in Ireland is called TENI, Transgender Equality Network Ireland. They've got some allegedly dodgy financial stories going on there. They don't seem... Somebody was tweeting about this today, and it's true. I was just thinking about it. Belong To is the other one. Now, Belong To is not just transgender, it's LGBT. So that's in their name, Belong To. It's the BLGT, whatever. They're more targeted towards kids, and they're extremely well financed. Belong To is really dangerous because they target children, and I don't know if you heard the Not All Gays people speaking or seen some of their tweets. Not All Gays is a brand new organization, grassroots little group of young gay Irish people who have stories about going to Belong To and being basically told, you're too feminine, you can't possibly be a man, you must be a girl, So a lot of people with mental health disorders, people confused about their sexuality or worried about it or whatever, and then they show up to this place, they have these lovely, friendly little evening sessions, and then basically it's not cool to be a cis straight person. You at the very least should be non-binary. So those are the kind of organizations. So the names of the big NGOs in Ireland are TENI, Belong To, and the other one is...
I like what you're saying there. I mean, and I think this came out in the Mermaids case versus the LGB Alliance, which we did the play about in London, that young people who, young effeminate gay men would go to somewhere like Belong To or to their counsellors or to their teachers. And when they see this effeminate person, they don't think, oh, that's an effeminate gay person. In fact, one of the people from Mermaids actually tried to say, no, there's no history of gay men being effeminate. And everyone laughed at that. I mean, this is what they're saying. They're trying to deny history. So when you're an effeminate gay man and you go to someone in the authority, you're told that you're transgender, not that you're gay. The phrase they used for it was transing away the gay.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems to have happened a lot, and there's some really good accounts. And maybe if you want to share with your viewers, there's some, not all gays, and there's some people like Clean City Birds. They've told their stories of what happened to them personally and belong to. So those are, we've got the traditional sort of classic LGB orgs as well that became LGBTQI orgs. Obviously, though they were also there the other day. But the other people, probably the most worrying part was the political parties, because I think it's hard to know exactly what goes on behind the scenes, but as I said, the NGOs are really well funded, so they definitely have the means to organize this sort of stuff. Then you've got the political parties, and I saw, so People Before Profit is one of them, and they're supposed to be this like real, like, we're for the working people. I can't imagine anything more ridiculous, like the most bourgeois people you've ever seen. And I saw 3 lads who I think come from that, I call them now the Puberty Blocker Party, because they're PBP, People Before Profit, Puberty Blocker Party. I saw them carrying a load of signs down the road, and the others, then I think there were some socialists, I think, and so they sort of rallied all their people. But they're all in these big networks, and they're in this big initiative called Trans Equality Together. And it's just so, in Ireland, they are so ideologically captured, and they are in the pockets of certain ministers. And it's really, it's a cancerous disease that it has, what's the words, when cancer goes everywhere? It's just spread throughout certain ministries,
It feels like there are very few Irish politicians who are speaking up for sanity. Obviously, there's the senator, Sharon, what's her name? Sharon McKeown? Keoghan. But I mean, there's so few of them. There's only a hand. There's like 1 or 2 or 3, whereas everyone else is either silent or complicit. And I suppose actually silence is complicity in this one.
Yeah, and the thing that is kind of heartening but also depressing at the same time is that we hear often that civil servants and senior civil servants are contacting TERFs and or we're hearing through the grapevine that they're sick of this and that they really are against it. But there's not much they can do. So it's the same in all the rest of Europe. Like, I follow the story in a lot of European countries. It's creating this Europe-wide turn rightwards. We're going to get more conservative right-wing parties. Like, they're doing the absolute worst thing for their cause, but they seem just so propelled by something. I don't know, like this fervor. They're just, I don't know how anyone can dig themselves out of this. So I sort of feel, and I feel this about the politicians, but ordinary people as well, don't say anything about it, because you'll have to dig yourself out of it in a couple of years from now. Like, I imagine public inquiries about puberty blocker doctors, I've got I'm not to blow my cover, but I'm in quite a few private Facebook and Discord groups of young people in Ireland who are shopping online for their hormones, and they're swapping the names of doctors who will do mastectomies on them and stuff. And so we have the names of the doctors who are doing it. We have the names of the people who are, there were people in those groups who are part of the NGOs who were given tips to like 16-year-olds on how to, the minute you hit 18, this is the name of the doctor in Poland who will do your mastectomy, giving them advice on how much weight you need to lose. Like, it's just, the rot is so deep. And I see that there are loads of people involved in this who are I just want them dragged in front of a public inquiry.
Just to, come away from the Irish, even the European situation, you've written some very interesting articles recently. I mean, the one, you meet more perverts when you're poor. The pampered activists who run our institutions have no idea what they're unleashing on women. I mean, you make the point that as an elite person from an educated middle class family with going to a nice school, it's there in the headline. You meet more perverts when you're poor. If you come from a dysfunctional community, maybe a dysfunctional family in a dysfunctional school, the safeguards aren't there. So therefore, predatory men pretending to be women to get access to girls and women are going to target that particular sector of society.
Yeah, well, I mean, everyone has a different reason for why they're so triggered by this. But I think if I were to sit down and meditate on it for a few hours, I would probably find the source of my major trigger. But I suspect what it is I made it through all of that. I made it through a couple of decades of being perved on, groped, followed, molested, raped, all of that stuff. And then somebody comes, my daughter is 7 years old, and some NGO comes along and says there's no difference between men and women. And there's something about that drives me up the wall. And the reason why, that article is really, really popular. It's the most popular thing I've ever written. And it gets like, people share it regularly. Just like I wrote it in January, but every now and then it pops up again and does the rounds. It's not my doing, but it really resonates with people. It annoys me because I was in the kitchen making dinner one day, and I just tapped it out while standing up. I had my laptop on the counter and I was standing up, and I tapped it out within 30 minutes. It was the least polished thing I've ever written, and it was the most popular thing I've ever written. I spend weeks on articles sometimes, but because it really came from the heart, because I think I was just there going, the reason I know that these people in the institutions don't know is because I've worked in the institutions. So I don't work now, but I used to work in the European Commission. And the thing about the European Commission, I'm a big EU fan. I know I'm a Nazi bigot fascist, but I'm a really big fan of European integration. And I think it's really common for people who come from small countries to be into EU integration because you can see the big benefits of it. It would be like, for us, it would be like splitting the United States into a million different tiny states. So I am a big fan of the EU, but I left the Commission. But while I was there for a few years, what I noticed was it took me a few years, but one day I really realized, these people don't know this. These people don't, because
No.
if you grow up with means and you go to the Scouts and you hear a rumor that the Scouts has a pedophilia problem, you take your kid out of the Scouts and you put them in tennis instead, So a girl growing up in those circumstances doesn't hear or get confronted, or you've loads of choices. Like when you're in a place where there's no facilities, no activities, nothing, you're just like, and so I find it even difficult to talk about it sometimes because the cheek of these people. And I remember one of the issues that we had was, I remember trying to say to the people that I worked with in the Commission, what would be really good? It would be really good if you hired some of the assistants, the lower tier sort of jobs in the institutions, hire them from working class people, communities, because we're making a lot of policies and laws here, and I don't think you've ever met the people that you're making the policies and laws for, and they think they know what a working class person is, and they think they know depravity. They don't know depravity. Like when I was growing up, I remember people calling us the working class, and I was always just like, nobody is working here. Why is everyone called a working class? And then I realized we were actually, we were the underclass, so when you grow up, like I've even found when I was working in the Commission, I found very difficult to find much in common with the quote unquote elites. I know I say it in a derogatory way, but you have to imagine, like, we have people from all over Europe, but you've got the elites of Romania and the elites of Bulgaria and the elites of even the poorest countries, and they especially people from those countries are particularly keen to distance themselves from any sort of
show her. Absolutely. They want to show that they're worthy of the club. We've met them. I mean, if you want to really meet the elites all together and discover how, as you say, Anne, the people from Tuvalu speak the elites from Tuvalu speak the same nonsense as the elites
and
in
the
Romania.
same messages, same language.
Message. Go to a climate conference.
Yeah.
Go to an IPCC climate conference. You'll meet people from Tuvalu, from Fiji, from Romania,
and Dublin,
and they're all saying exactly the same.
And they all have the same phone.
Yeah, no, we know exactly what you mean, but you think the people.
No, they think,
the fact that they despise the people of Tuvalu more than the elites of Romania might despise the people of Tuvalu, because they look down on their working classes and underclasses. They have no concept of them.
And I noticed that last week. So I got into a bit of a Twitter drama last week because I love Kelly J. Keene's approach of any woman can speak and nobody's any different from anyone else. And no woman is more worthy of speaking at her events than anyone else. And we had a 2.5 hour long Twitter space. And in it, I said, I was talking about women, and I said, if you identify with the far right, you're also welcome to come. That's totally fine. And what I meant by that, and I hate to have, because when you're explaining, you're losing. But what I was trying to say is all of the women who have been tagged as far right because there might be anti-vax, or because they were anti-lockdown, or because they have issues with uncontrolled immigration, which I don't have an opinion on any of these things. I'm just I remain completely neutral as I say this. Those women are despised. Like in Ireland, and somebody made the remark to me, well, it might have even been you, I don't remember, but somebody said Ireland is a really classist society. And I've been thinking about it a lot since then. So somebody took my clip out of context, of course, and said, look, Posey Parker's organisers, and I wasn't an organiser at all, I'm just a Twitter TERF, but they said, look, they've invited the far-right Nazi thugs to the event, that's proof. And I was like, so I've been trying to make the point ever since that, like, every single woman I grew up with on that housing estate is what we would call persona non grata, scum of the earth, far right.
Nowadays, I mean, you can go to nice pubs in the west of Ireland, and you'll be with a group of women, and they'll suddenly lower their voice, and they'll say they'll start talking about those topics. So it's just not working class or underclass. Even the middle class now they're afraid to speak publicly. So, but I was I really like that article that you wrote. As you say, you just rattled it out. But there's that the elites, they watch films about the poors, but they have never, no one's ever captured, as you say, that desperate feeling of being compromised by having no money, no recourse, no authority, no protection. But the girls who make the rules now don't see any reason why a couple of, quote, bad apples should prevent poor men from being able to live their true, authentic life in the body they deserve. They don't believe it when you tell them men are opportunists, or worse, they think they know what you mean. So I suppose they don't believe that some people are fundamentally bad and will exploit people and will predate on people.
I think that's it. I think it's this like very optimistic view of the world. And what's funny about it all, I mean, the whole gender thing, all the sociologists who introduced these concepts, who deconstructed gender until it turned it to dust and it whittled away into nothing, so there's no such thing as man or woman or anything, all those people have a fundamentally overly optimistic view of the world, saying that if everything is socially constructed, then we can fix it, and that's a lovely way to think, but that it's a luxury belief, as they say. It's nice for those people to be able to think that way. And what annoys me is they all go off, and a lot of the sociologists who are involved in the deconstruction of gender, and all these researchers and the people who help the UN and the institutions, introduce these concepts that we're all dealing with now. They study poverty, but you can't study what underclass women experience. And when I say underclass, like, I don't mean that like I'm just using the term that most people probably are familiar with the term underclass. We all know what we mean when we say that term. Right now I'm a gentrifier, so I have money now, I have a job, I've done really well for myself, it's very, very good, but I'm one of those people who bought a house in a very poor neighborhood in Brussels, so like 80% of my neighbors are from the North African Maghrebian countries like Algeria and Tunisia and Morocco and stuff. My closest friend reads the Quran every day, wears a veil, very, very poor people, but like ridiculously poor. And we have, a lot of them are Moroccan, but a lot of them are Brazilian and Portuguese. And you've got these little cafes that are tiny toilets, and they're separated by sex. And, the cafe on the end of my street, they have a key for the women's toilet so that the men don't go in there. That's the reality of it, These men will be there drinking all day long. And the women, if they want to be able to go out and have a cup of coffee or have a beer, there has to be a way to protect them. And I just see it every day, because that's where me and my boyfriend go for a beer, like, of an evening. It's real let them eat cake stuff, like.
How we're coming to the end of the time here, but Roisin, I have a question for you. How does this end? How does this madness end? I mean, I compare this to eugenics, and and everyone thought eugenics was a great idea. It was incredibly popular. All the smartest people on the planet Earth agreed on it. And if you didn't agree on it, you were ignoramus.
You're anti-science.
And you were anti-science and all that. How does this end? I mean, there's no ending it without an incredible amount of damage, by the way, to the children that have already been, destroyed. But how does this just come to an end where we then look back and say, I think people should go to prison, by the way. But how does it end, do you think?
Honestly, I just don't know. I just want to know where it all comes from. And it's interesting that you mentioned eugenics, because a lot of it is linked to International Planned Parenthood Federation and to different development agencies who are working on family planning and stuff. And that's why I'm saying it's such a long story. So I might contact the people who edited Glinner's book and try and see if maybe we could try and get the story down on paper, because I feel like if we can figure out where it came from, then we know what we're tackling, because it's being framed as a human rights issue, but it's not. It's something else. There is a reason why everybody suddenly pretended to care about a small minority of cross-dressing men. There's a reason for it, and I think the intentions behind that were very, very good. And we need to figure out what the reason is. I know that in the US, it's going to end up, it's the lawsuits that will change everything. But then I think here, like Stella O'Malley has a great quote where she says that 3 weeks before the fall of the Soviet Union, or before of the fall of the Berlin Wall or whatever, everybody thought that everybody else, was on board with this. And then it turned out that they were all thinking the exact same thing, that it was madness. So sorry, I'm really bad at history. I can't remember which country it might have been, in Romania with Ceausescu or something, I don't know. But basically, I think I hosted a few women in my house over the weekend, women coming in from the UK, and they left all sorts of TERF related detritus all over my house. And I found a business card this morning on my kitchen table, and it said the first rule of TERF Club is always talk about TERF Club. So I just bring it up whenever I can. And Aja, the Empress, had a really funny suggestion the other day. She said, if you're on the bus, have a fake phone call with someone and tell them something. So you're not like accosting people with information. She was saying, like, pretend you're on the phone to your best mate and say to them, did you see that?
Very good.
It's funny, and actually, I saw something on Twitter. I don't know if you saw that. Somebody who had been at the rally, and they were on the train, I suppose, going back to Cork or Galway or something, and they were, just chatting with their friend, and how much a great time they had and everything. And then they met a couple, and they all got chatting. The next thing, she saw this man dressed up as a woman glaring at them, wearing a kind of a wig. But she took a photograph of him. She put it up on Twitter, and it was like, he was raging because she said, like, they weren't conscious of him at all. They were just chatting about what a great day they'd had, and chatting up this other couple and everything. And a photograph of him glaring at them, like, and he was grunting, like he made a few big grunts, to let them know that he did not approve, and that he had been on the other side of the barricade.
Do you really want to be going and, like, as I say, accosting people and saying to them, why aren't you so angry about this? So we're going to have to do it in a more peripheral way, I think, like, dropping the odd comment, like, about, this man and this prison into your conversation or whatever, and just get people sort of interested. Leave your, I stickered Dublin Airport female stickers this morning.
People speak. I just saw a little handout from TENI, the group that you mentioned earlier, TENI, who obviously are very well funded. And it was, really disturbing stuff. And the idea that people aren't speaking about this, and it was this, how the best way to do your binding your chest, and all these kind of, written in this style of a health brochure, like, don't do this and do this and get this, whatever. And I just thought, this is complete madness, and we're being ghosted here. We're being not ghosted. We're being gaslit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that play Rhinoceros, where it's like, you just kind of, is this completely mad? This is a completely mad world, and more people need to stand up and say, this is completely mad, and I'm not going to play along with your madness. But people are frightened, and people have been silent.
I try to imagine the most charitable explanation for why, people are doing, our opposition, let's just call them that, why they behave the way they do and why they behave the way they did on Saturday towards us. And I think that if I thought there was a group of people who were anti-Semitic, I would probably do the same thing, maybe. I don't know if I would, so I just sort of think some of them might actually think we are that bad, and some of them are pretending to think we're that bad, and they're actually just misogynistic and they just hate women telling them no. But I think normies are just looking at this going, is that anti-Semitic thing? Oh my God, my friend's being captured by it. And so you have to go so slowly and just drop a little bit of info, because I don't know, like, I feel a lot more compassion for people who during lockdown were completely against vaccinations. So I'm vaxxed to the max. I was okay with lockdown because I'm of the laptop class. But I remember friends coming at me, because as I said, I have loads and loads of friends from diverse backgrounds, and people coming at me and just saying, how can you even consider giving a vaccine to your child? And I was like, whoa. And now I feel really bad for them for not that I've changed my mind about vaccines or whatever, but we need to start listening to people who have different opinions. So that's another point of this whole thing. Like Kelly J. Keane says, this is a free speech issue as well,
So unfortunately, we've run out of time, but honestly, this was fantastic, Roisin. Thank you so much. I know that she is literally in the door of the plane from being in Dublin for the weekend at the march, and we are so grateful for your time. Thank you so much.
It was lovely talking to you.
Yeah. Oh, how can people
get in touch with you? Sorry.
And how can they follow you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. My name is Roisin Michaux. So my first name, my last name, as you can probably see there. And yeah, I have a Substack. It's called Peaked, so you can find me on there as well.
We'll put the links up in the show notes so people will be able to find you.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, Roisin. Well, thank you so much.
Have a lovely day. Talk soon.
Yeah, as she says, she doesn't see a happy ending. There'll be a lot of misery, a lot of pain and misery. That's the thing I took out of that, was there'll be a lot of pain and a lot of misery before there's a happy ending.
It's a huge issue. I think something I regretted not asking her about was that there is some, there's quite a few positive things happening in Europe. Certain countries in Europe have actually banned the practice of puberty blockers for children and surgeries for children. So there are some positive developments, including the fact that the Tavistock Centre in the UK was closed. But you then have places like Ireland. You have crazy stuff going on all over, going on all over the place. So we need to watch this space.
So other news, I really wanted to cover this story because it's very, very interesting. You may have seen in the headlines that Trump condemned Ron DeSantis for signing the fetal heartbeat bill, which outlawed or made illegal abortions after 6 weeks in Florida. So let's just look at what Trump said.
What Trump actually said.
So let's play a little bit of the quote now. Okay, let's play that quote.
I would sit down with both sides and I'd negotiate something, and we'll end up with peace on that issue for the first time in 52 years. I'm not going to say I would or I wouldn't. I mean, DeSantis is willing to sign a 5-week and 6-week ban.
Would you support that? You think that
I think what he did is a terrible thing and a terrible mistake.
He goes on then to say, Democrats aren't, he sort of says it there, but he goes even into more detail. Democrats are not, they don't want abortions up to 9 months. They don't want abortions up to 8 months.
Democrats don't want to see abortion in the 7th month. Okay, I speak to a lot of Democrats.
I disagree.
The unfortunate reality is they do.
They do.
Right.
And that's why they find it so difficult when questioned to say when they would have a cutoff of any kind.
So many people do.
I think Trump is very wrong on this one, because he is saying that he thinks that the Democrats he's actually describing the Democrats of the Bill Clinton years, where Bill Clinton said safe, legal and rare. I haven't heard one Democrat yet talk like that. I haven't heard one. So Trump saying that that's the position of the Democrats is inaccurate in fact, because what's happened now with these ballot measures that have been going on around the country, and of course there's going to be one now in Ohio in November, is that in fact in some ways they are now into the constitutions in individual states, they're actually making it legal to have an abortion up to 9 months for basically any reason, because they say things like for the health, the financial health of the woman, the psychological health, the social health,
right.
And if you start that kind of slippery slope, then it's anything, anytime, anywhere.
Yeah. And look, he may, by the way, you got to separate the truth from politics, right? And I think this ties down. Trump advanced the pro-life cause more than any president ever, I think, since abortion was legalized.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's because he's a transactional president. He promised that he would do that, and he did it.
Yeah.
He's now saying, and again, you've got to separate the politics from the moral case. And perhaps he's right. Perhaps it's a vote loser to be anti-abortion after up to 6 weeks. Maybe it is. So certainly the pro-life are losing a lot of referendums and that. So maybe Trump is right that this is a vote loser. But just like if you are a Democrat and you say, you know what, I think abortion should be legal up to 15 weeks and nothing afterwards, like Trump is trying to say, you would be primaried and you'd lose your primary. Yeah. Similarly, if you're a Republican and you say, I want to, be more flexible and maybe 20, then you would lose your primary also. So there's the political truth, political reality, and the morality. And
I think it's worth saying. I think Phelim was sort of saying there about the ballot measures that have happened across the country. So there's been 6 so far. The 7th one will be in Ohio. There'll be 4 more in November of 2024. But I think the reason why the pro-life side are losing is, well, at least one reason. I've got 2 reasons. One reason is they are vastly outspent.
Yes.
Our very dear friend Richard Viguerie, who is the funding father of America and knows all about NGOs and 501c3s like ourselves and our funding issues. Basically, he says that the pro-life movement the pro-abortion movement are spending 1,000% more on this issue than the pro-life side. So vastly outspent. And the second thing that they're doing, and they have the agreement and the collusion of the mainstream media, is that they are lying. Mm-hmm. And they're lying and they're getting away with the lies. So they're basically saying things like, women are dying. God, since Roe, women are dying. Women are not dying. There's no evidence of that at all. But they're saying that, and it's a kind of an easy narrative, and it sounds good, by the way. It sounds very compelling, and it's like, who wants to be on the side of women dying, right? So this is complete nonsense. But this is how they're winning. So we have to fight harder. And because I think I've kind of hinted at this a few times, we have a plan for Ohio. We have a plan for that ballot measure. And our plan is very much about education. Bringing the truth. We're not telling people how to vote. We're saying people should know everything before they vote. People should be informed, very informed of what exactly it is that they are being asked to vote for.
So watch this space.
And I think an awful lot of people, I very often wonder how many people in Colorado know that you can have an abortion for any reason up to 9 months in Colorado, completely legally. How many people know that? How many people in New Mexico know that you can have abortion up to 9 months in New Mexico, or New York, or New Jersey, or California, or Washington State, or Oregon, and all these other places? I just wonder how many people actually know that. So I think it's good to bring the truth about this to people. And I think it's a very easy way. This was a lovely segue into me saying, we need your help. As I've mentioned a few times before, we have a donor who is donating $25,000 this month in September to help us with the cause. And we really need you to come up to the plate and to match that. And anything that you can give will make a huge difference, because this is an incredibly important fight, and the problem is that the lies are getting propagated, and there's an incredible amount of money behind those lies, and we need to tell the truth. Just tell the truth about what this really looks like and what this really involves. And I think you kind of know where I'm going with this. We will tell you more next week.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think that's the end of the show.
I think that's the end of us. But we will, and obviously we had an extraordinary weekend, met some fabulous people, and just a lovely, and what was interesting with the crowd that we were with, the crowd on the side of the Let Women Speak group, was people were really nice. People were very happy. They were loving being together. They weren't angry. People were chatting to each other. There was lovely people. There were people there. I spoke to a couple of men. There was quite a number of men there, actually. Mm-hmm. And I spoke to a couple of men, and they were basically saying, like, one guy said to me, he was kind of an older guy, he sort of said, I've never been to anything like this before. But he said, I have grown up children, but I have grandchildren. And I'm really scared, he was saying, about this. And that's the kind of people that were there. The other side, as I said, was very much peopled by, it felt very corporate, if you know what I mean. It felt very super organised. They had all the, they had all the flags. And as we heard from Roisin, her suspicion is that they're basically all paid for. They're all part of this NGO network of trans activist NGOs that are paid for by Irish taxpayers. Anyway, that's not good news.
So if you want to help us do what we do, go to Unreported Story Society, donate what you can. It's tax deductible.
Yeah, we are a 501c3. Please do that. UnreportedStorySociety.com, and we'll put the links in the show notes.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.